I have held this Bible for a long time before I decided to tell anyone about it. It is sitting on my kitchen table right now. I can see the cover from where I am. Brown leather, cracked along the spine, worn at the corners until the color has almost gone. The edges of the pages have gone soft from being turned so many times. There is dust still caught in the binding, the kind of dust that settles into things that have been hidden for years. It is not a big book. It fits in both hands easily, but the weight of it does not match its size. Every time I pick it up, I feel that. The weight of it. I need to tell you where this came from. Before I do, I want to ask you something. If you have ever found something that made you realize you did not know a person as well as you thought you did, then stay with me. Because this story is going to ask something of you. It is going to ask you to sit with me inside a moment I have never spoken about out loud. And I need to know you are still there before I begin. My name is Amina. I am 48 years old. I live in Melbourne. I clean classrooms for a living, and I am not ashamed of that. I have been doing it for 11 years. I push a mop down long empty corridors before the children arrive, and I think that is an honest way to spend a morning. I am also a widow, and that is where this story begins. Before my husband died, I thought I understood our life completely. I thought I knew what we believed, what we valued, and where we both stood with God. We had been married for 22 years. We had built our home together. We had argued and laughed and gone quiet at each other and come back together again, the way people do when they have shared a long time. I worked, he worked. I prayed the way I had always prayed, the same words I had known since I was young, repeated in the same order. I was not a woman who wondered about things outside what I already knew. I did not think there was a reason to. I believed I understood my husband. That belief was wrong, but I did not find that out until after he was gone. The Bible had been in my life before I knew what it was. My husband had an old metal toolbox, big, heavy, scratched along the sides from years of being dragged in and out of the garage. It sat on the bottom shelf, and I had walked past it hundreds of times without giving it a second thought. It was his. Tools were his. I did not go into it. But I remember one afternoon, maybe 3 years before he died, he opened the box while I was walking through the garage carrying washing. I glanced over. I saw the usual things: screwdrivers, a roll of grey tape, bolts in a small container, and in the back corner, something with a brown cover, tucked under a coil of wire. I thought it was an old notebook. He kept notes on jobs sometimes. I did not ask about it. I just kept walking with the washing. I have thought about that moment many times since then. I walked right past it. The first time Jesus came up between us, I laughed. We were sitting at the table after dinner. The dishes were done. He had his tea in front of him. He was quiet for a while, the way he sometimes got in the evenings, and then he looked at me and he said, "What do you think Jesus meant when he said we should forgive people? Like, not just say it, actually forgive them. What do you think that means?" I looked at him and I actually laughed. Not a kind laugh, a short one. "Where is this coming from?" I said. He shrugged. He said he had just been thinking about it. I told him we were Muslim. I said he should stop filling his head with things that did not belong to us. I was not angry yet. I was more dismissive than anything. I said it the way you say something when you think the subject is already closed, and then I got up and put the kettle on. He did not push it that night. He just nodded and looked at his tea. The toolbox was in the garage. The Bible was inside it. I did not know that then. Months passed. Things happened at his work. There was some kind of trouble with a colleague, something that had gone wrong and left him quiet for several days. I did not ask enough questions about it. I see that now. He came home one evening and sat down heavily in his chair, and he said, "I have been reading about Jesus." I stopped what I was doing. He said he could not stop thinking about his words. He said there was something in them that he kept coming back to. I felt irritated. Not the slow kind of irritated that builds quietly. The quick kind that rises before you can catch it. I said, "We have been through this." He said, "I know, but I haven't stopped thinking about it." I told him I did not want to have the conversation. I told him I was tired, and there was dinner to deal with, and that I needed him to let this go. I said it like I was protecting something, like I was holding a wall up, and one more push would bring it down. He did not say anything else. He picked up the remote and turned the television on. I told myself I had handled it. I told myself that was the end of it. But I remember feeling something that night that I could not name. a small, uncomfortable feeling, like something had been said between us that we had not said out loud. The toolbox was a few meters away. The Bible was inside it. He had already been reading it for months. The worst night between us came later. I do not know exactly how much later. Time blurs when you look back at grief. I woke up past midnight, and he was not in bed. I got up and walked down the hallway, and the light in the living room was on. I walked in, and he was sitting in his chair with something in his hands, and when he heard me, he closed it quickly and put it beside him, face down. I stood in the doorway. I said, "What are you reading?" He said, "Nothing. Go back to sleep." I felt something cold move through me. Not fear. Something harder than fear. I said, "Don't tell me it is nothing. You hid it when I walked in." He said, "I wasn't hiding it." I said, "You put it face down." He looked at me, and he said, "Amina, I have been searching for something. I have been trying to find answers to things, and I have not known how to talk to you about it." I said, "Answers to what? What questions?" He said, "About forgiveness, about what happens to us, about what is real." I said, "You are searching in the wrong place." I told him I did not want Jesus in our home. I said it plainly. I said I was not going to sit in my own house and watch him read something that had nothing to do with who we were. He did not argue. He just looked at me with an expression I did not understand at the time. I understand it now. It was not defeat. It was something quieter than that. Like he had hoped the conversation would go differently, and it had not. I went back to bed. He stayed in the chair. The toolbox was in the garage. I still did not know what was in it. My husband died on an ordinary Tuesday. It was not a long illness. It was not something we had prepared for. It was the kind of death that arrives without a warning and leaves you standing in the middle of your kitchen, not knowing what to do with your hands. One day he was there, and then he was not. I will not go into the detail of it. I cannot. What I will say is that the days after are not what people expect them to be. People expect grief to be weeping, and it is, but it is also cleaning. It is going through a man's belongings and finding his handwriting on a shopping list and having to sit down on the floor. It is giving his shirts to someone who can use them and then standing at the wardrobe and not being able to remember why you opened it. It is keeping busy because the moment you stop moving, the silence gets louder than you can bear. I cleaned. I sorted. I moved things into bags and boxes. It was easier than sitting still. It was easier than the empty chair at the kitchen table that I could not bring myself to move. I left the garage for weeks. It was too full of him. Eventually, I could not leave it any longer. I needed the space. I needed to stop walking past the closed door and feeling that pull of dread every time I saw it. So one morning I went in. I started with the shelves along the wall. I worked slowly. I put things in boxes. I found things that made me stop and things that made me keep going. And then I got to the bottom shelf, and I got to the toolbox. I almost left it. I almost said I would come back to it another day, but something made me reach down and pull the latch open. The tools were the same as they had always been. Screwdrivers arranged in order, the roll of tape, the bolts in their little container, and there, wrapped in an old grey cloth in the back corner, was the Bible. I lifted the cloth away. The cover was brown leather, cracked and worn. I opened it, and his handwriting was everywhere, in the margins, beside whole passages, some words underlined twice, some with small question marks beside them, some with stars. It was his, all of it. Every mark in that book was his hand. I sat down on the garage floor with it, and I read the first note I found. He had written it beside a passage about forgiveness. I do not remember the exact words of the passage now, but his note said that he had been reading this because he could not stop thinking about why forgiveness felt so difficult and why Jesus kept saying it was possible. He wrote that he had tried to understand it from everything he already knew, and it had not been enough. I stared at those words. I told myself he had been confused. I told myself that he had been going through something, and this had been a coping mechanism, and that it did not mean anything beyond that. I told myself there was a practical explanation for all of it, but I did not put the Bible down. I kept reading. I turned pages slowly, and I read every note he had left, and I kept going. The second note stopped me completely. It was tucked inside a page near the middle of the book. He had written it on a folded piece of notepaper, the kind we kept in the kitchen drawer by the phone. I recognized the paper before I even unfolded it. He had written that he had been praying for me. not praying that I would change, not asking God to make me believe what he believed. He had been praying that if he died before he could explain what he had found, God would give me peace. He wrote that he did not know how to talk to me about it because I had shut the conversations down before he could begin them. He wrote that he hoped I would understand one day. I read that sentence 3 times. I read it and I sat on the garage floor and I cried until there was nothing left to cry. He had been carrying all of this quietly. He had been sitting with questions that mattered deeply to him, and he had tried to bring them to me, and I had shut every door before he could walk through. He had not been hiding something from me to deceive me. He had been protecting something fragile while he waited for the right moment that never came. And while I had been certain that I understood our life completely, he had been sitting with a whole part of himself that I never let him share. After I brought the Bible inside, I could not stop thinking about it. It was in every quiet moment. In the car, in the school corridors while I was working, in the space between putting the light out and falling asleep. I would be doing something ordinary, and my mind would go straight back to those notes in the margins. And then, stranger things began to happen. I left the Bible on the nightstand one evening. I know I did. I looked at it before I turned the lamp off. I remember the position it was in, spine up, lying on its side. The next morning it was on the kitchen table. I stood and looked at it for a long time. I told myself I had moved it. I told myself I had come to the kitchen in the night without remembering, the way you sometimes do when you are tired and grieving and your sleep is broken. I picked it up and I put it back in the bedroom. 2 nights later, it was beside my husband's chair. The chair I could not bring myself to move, the one that still sat at the head of the table where he always sat. The Bible was sitting right beside it, the cloth still wrapped around it, like it had been placed there by someone who knew exactly where it belonged. I stood in the kitchen doorway. I did not go in straight away. I just stood there. Then I went in, picked it up, took it to the kitchen, and put it in the drawer under the cutlery. I pushed the drawer shut firmly. I went to bed. I told myself it was nothing. I was not sleeping properly. I was under enormous stress. I was a woman who had buried her husband weeks ago, and I was alone in a house full of his things, and my mind was doing what minds do under that kind of pressure. There was an explanation. There was always an explanation. A week later, I went through the same routine. I put the Bible in the kitchen drawer before I went to bed. I heard the drawer shut. I went down the hall. I got into bed. I lay there for a long time in the dark. I fell asleep. I woke before dawn. That particular kind of waking, where your eyes open and something is already different without you knowing what it is yet. I lay still for a moment. And then I got up. I walked to the kitchen. The drawer was closed. The Bible was sitting on my husband's chair. I stood there, in the dark kitchen in the early morning light that was just beginning to come through the window, and I looked at that book sitting on his chair. And something shifted inside me. Not dramatically. Not like a thunderclap. Just a slow shift, the way ice moves before it breaks. The explanation I had depended on my whole life was no longer enough, and I knew it. I began going back through everything. The dinner where he asked me about forgiveness, and I laughed. The evening he told me he had been reading, and I shut it down. The night I found him in the chair and told him I did not want Jesus in our home. Every single time he had tried to bring it to me, I had pushed it away. And every single time, the Bible had been nearby. In the toolbox in the garage. In the chair in the living room. In his hands in the dark. I had been in the same rooms as that book for years without knowing it was there. He had been carrying it the whole time. And now it kept appearing in places I had not put it. Right where he used to sit. Right in the spaces he used to occupy. I did not believe it was a coincidence. But I also was not ready to call it anything else. What it made me feel was something I had not expected. Angry at myself. Not at my husband. Not at the Bible. At myself. Because I had asked him to stop talking about it without ever once asking him why it mattered. I had been so certain I was protecting our home that I had never thought to ask him what he was trying to find. He had been looking for answers to something real, and I had told him the search was wrong without understanding what he was searching for. I had never asked him, and now I could not. There are nights that sit differently from other nights. This was one of them. I had been going through the motions of each day, getting up, going to work, coming home, eating something, going to bed. It was not living, it was enduring, and I was getting tired. It was late. The house was quiet. I had turned the lights off in the rest of the house, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with just the one light on above me. And I sat there in that yellow light, in that quiet house, and I finally ran out of the energy to push everything away. I reached for the Bible, not angrily, not with the determination I had brought to it before. I reached for it the way you reach for something when you do not have any other move left. I opened it, and I sat with it, and for a few minutes nothing happened. Just the pages, just his handwriting in the margins, just the silence of the house around me. I almost put it down, and then the room changed. I do not have a better word for it than that. The room changed. Not the furniture, not the light. Something else. Like the air had become heavier without becoming cold. Like the space around me had become full of something that had not been there a moment before. My hands went still on the pages. My breathing slowed. I became very aware of the chair I was sitting in, the table under my hands, the stillness in my body. I was not alone. I knew it before anything else happened. I knew it the way you know something in the back of your throat before it reaches your mind. A presence. Quiet. Completely still. Not threatening. Not dramatic. Just there, the way something enormously real is there. And then I heard a voice. It was calm. It was not loud. It did not come from a direction. It was simply there, inside the room, inside the quiet. It said, "Amina, I know the pain you are carrying. You do not have to carry it alone." That was all. I did not say something wise. I did not respond with a prayer or a declaration. I gripped the Bible with both hands and I cried. Properly cried. The kind that comes from a place deeper than sadness. And when I could form words, I said the only thing I had. If you are really there, please don't leave me. The voice did not come again. But the thing I can only describe as the presence, stayed for a while longer. And the fear I had been carrying since the night I found him in the chair, reading in the dark, the fear I had carried through the funeral and the empty weeks after, began to loosen, not disappear, loosen. Like a knot that has been pulled too tight for too long, and someone has finally found the right thread. I sat there until the room became ordinary again. I do not know how long that was. The next morning I woke up, and I was the same person. The grief was still there. The empty space at the table was still there. But I did not put the Bible in a drawer. I left it on the table. I made tea. I sat down, and I opened it to one of the passages my husband had underlined, the ones about forgiveness, and I read it slowly. I started to understand why his questions had mattered. I did not become a different woman overnight. That is not how it works, in my experience. What changed was smaller than that. I started noticing when I was about to say something harsh to someone, and I stopped before I said it. There was a relative I had not spoken to properly in 2 years over something that was not worth 2 years of silence. I called her, we talked. It was uncomfortable at first, and then it was not. At the school, there is an elderly woman who comes in on Thursdays to pick up her grandchildren. She always waited on a bench outside. I started bringing her a cup of tea from the staff room. She never asked me to. I just did it. I did not expect her to make a fuss about it. She didn't. We just sat for a few minutes and drank tea, and that was enough. The grief did not lift. I want to be honest about that. There is no version of this story where I found Jesus, and the sadness went away. That is not what happened. What happened was smaller and also larger at the same time. I stopped waking up every morning feeling entirely alone. That was not a small thing. For the months after he died, I had woken up every single morning feeling like the ground had been pulled out from under me. And slowly, that changed. But the hard nights did not stop. There are still nights when I sit on the edge of the bed, and I miss him so much that I cannot name it. Miss is too small a word. I ache for him, for the sound of him in the kitchen, for the weight of him beside me in the dark. I still have nights like that, and I think I probably always will. I also still ask why. I have not made peace with the question of why he died when he did, and why I did not get more time, and why the conversations we needed to have never happened. I have not resolved that. But I no longer carry the question alone, in the dark. I bring it to Jesus. I say, I do not understand this, and I need you to hold it with me, because I cannot hold it alone. That is the only prayer I know how to pray now. And it seems to be enough. The Bible is back in the toolbox. Not because I am hiding it. The first time I put it there after the garage, I was still angry, still unsure, still not ready to call any of this what I now know it to be. That is not why it is there now. I put it back because the toolbox is his, because it is scratched and dented, and it has been sitting in this house since before I understood what was inside it. The book belongs with the box. It feels right that way. I am not ashamed of it anymore. If someone sees it, I will tell them what it is. I will tell them where it came from, and what it meant to the man who kept it there, and what it came to mean to me. That is not something I would have said a year ago. Right now, I am sitting at the kitchen table, the same table I was sitting at on the night the room changed. The Bible is in front of me. I am holding it with both hands, which is what I seem to always do with it, both hands, like it might go somewhere, if I only use one. I just noticed something I had not noticed before. One corner of the cover is different from the rest. The leather there is softer, almost smooth. The color has come away almost completely, worn down to nothing. I have looked at this book many times. I held it in the garage on the floor. I held it on the table in the middle of the night. I have turned through its pages more times than I can count, but I only just now understood what I was looking at. That corner is where he held it. That is the spot where his thumb rested every time he opened it, every time he sat in that chair in the dark reading it when he thought I was asleep, every time he read it in the garage, with the toolbox lid open, hoping I wouldn't notice, every time he went back to it alone, with his questions, and his notes, and his searching. He held it there so many times that the leather remembered his hand. I once thought my husband had hidden a book from me. I was angry about that for a long time. I felt like he had kept something important from me, like there had been a secret life running underneath the surface of our life together, and I had been kept out of it. But sitting here now, looking at this corner of worn leather, I am not sure that is the right way to see it anymore. I think he had been trying to tell me. Every dinner conversation I laughed off. Every night he sat with his questions. Every time he mentioned Jesus, and I told him to stop. He had been trying to bring it to me, and I had not been ready to receive it. And so he kept it safe. He kept it wrapped in a cloth inside a toolbox on the bottom shelf of the garage. He prayed for me in the margins of the pages. He asked God to give me peace if he died before he could explain what he had found. And then he died, and I found it. Maybe he was not hiding it from me at all. Maybe he had been quietly leaving behind the one thing he hoped I would someday find. I know some of you are carrying something right now. I do not know what it is. Maybe it is grief like mine. Maybe it is something else you have been holding for a long time, something you have not said out loud to anyone, because there is no one around you who would understand the weight of it. Maybe you are sitting somewhere right now pretending you are fine, and you have been pretending for so long it is starting to feel like the truth. I want you to do something for me. In the comments below, I want you to put down whatever it is you are carrying. Not because I am going to fix it. I cannot fix anything. But I will read what you write. And I will pray for you. Not in a general way. I will read your words. And I will bring your name to the same place I bring my own pain. And I will ask for peace for you, the same way my husband asked for peace for me, without me ever knowing. You do not have to do this alone. I am keeping the Bible on the kitchen table today. There is a faint smell that still comes off the pages sometimes when I first open them. It is faint, and I cannot always catch it, but when I do, it catches me off guard every time. It smells like the soap he used. Every time I catch it, I have to sit still for a moment, and then I keep reading.